Okay, let's test and see if the audio is working here. Okay, let's test and see if the audio is working here. Okay, that seemed to work on my end, so let's get going. So here is the setup that we have. So the plan for this is, of course, the Dawn of Yangchen speculation. We're going to go as in-depth as possible with this. And then I did say that I would do sort of Avatar theories as a second topic. We'll see, how long the book speculation actually takes. But I do have some theories to go through that some people recommended, and then of course chat can recommend some if we get there. So we'll come back to that in just a second, but there's speculation to be had here. So I put up a video very shortly after the book was first announced, but we now have the excerpt to go off as well. So there's a few more extra things to kind of go into, and of course just we've had more time to think about it as well. So we're going to go quite heavily into this one. So yeah, Dawn of Yangchen, it's Chronicles of the Avatar Book 3. July 19th is the release date, so we're like 5 weeks away from this book. Very, very exciting. In that, at least to me, I'm just as excited for this book as I am like hearing about the next animation project. I think that's how much the Kyoshi novels impressed me, and I really think that this is going to deliver here with Yang Chen. Very excited to see the novel format with a different avatar. So very, very excited. Especially just because it's one of those pieces of the content where I can do so much coverage of it when it actually does come out. I'm really looking forward to doing the chapter by chapter analysis videos, podcast reviews of it, video reviews, and just seeing what people have to say about it. So I suppose for let's just go through kind of everything we know. Of course, they have the cover up there just above me on the video. And here is the description. Obviously, we've gone over this a bunch of times, but for maybe people who haven't seen it yet, I've obviously highlighted the key points from it here. So let's get into this. So Yang Chen's inexperience may prove to be her greatest asset. Plagued by the voices of avatars before her for as long as she can remember, Yang Chen has not yet earned the respect felt for Avatar Zito, her predecessor. In an era where loyalty is bought rather than earned, she has little reason to trust her counsel. When Yang Chen travels to Bin-Er in the Earth Kingdom on political business, a chance encounter with an informant named Kavik leads to a wary partnership. Bin-Er is a city ruled by corrupt Shang merchants who have become resentful of the mercurial Earth King and his whims. To extract themselves from his influence, the Shangs have one solution in mind, a mysterious weapon of mass destruction that would place power squarely in their hands. As Yang Chen and Kavik seek to thwart the Shang's plan, their unlikely friendship deepens. But for Yang Chen to chart her course as a singularly powerful avatar, she must learn to rely on her own wisdom above all else. So, like I focused on here, this was very interesting when it first came out. From the excerpt, we now know that when they talk about plagued by voices of the avatars, it's very literal. That her connection to the past lives is always on to some extent. It can just happen whenever. It's just automatic, whereas it seems to be a challenge for other avatars to communicate with their past lives. It's no problem at all with Yang Chen. She can't stop it from happening is the problem. So it's kind of in reverse for her. So immediately one avenue of speculation is going to be, why is this happening? What's different about Yang Chen that is causing it to work in that way? And why is it actually happening? So the other thing here, Avatar Zito directly referenced here, and it makes sense. He is the avatar before Yang Chen. The end of his era will, I suppose, define the start of Yangchen's era. So we don't know too much about him. We'll get into that speculation as we go through this, of course. But interestingly, when we encounter her, as she is for most of the book, she's not respected as the Avatar just yet. And given that we know she goes on to become one of the most respected avatars, that is a very interesting dynamic. Because it seems like as we go forward, it's actually Yangchen and Salai who are the respected avatars, rather than necessarily like Salai, Yangchen, and Zito. So, as far as the public is concerned, Yangchen maybe surpasses Zito. So that's quite interesting, especially with the whole plaguing of voices. And then it means that there shouldn't be any real problem getting Zito, Yangchen conversations. And given that she seems to be quite spiritual, this should be a relatively open dialogue. But of course, they won't want to overuse connection with the past lives. So it'll be interesting to see how they balance that, given that people want more past avatars, so that it'll have to happen at some point. So maybe there's a weird thing where like maybe her connection with the past avatars only works in the weird way that it does, as we see in the excerpt, and that she can't maybe do the typical conversation that we see. That would be kind of a bit of a weird one. In an era where loyalty is bought rather than earned. So this is all we seemingly know so far about the era of Yangchen. So we're, give or take, I suppose, let's assume Yangchen lives to be like 80, 90. We're still probably like, 120 years or something like that before the whole Kyoshi era stuff. So we're going back quite a bit to this era. So we're not really expecting Dao Fei. Likely we'll still see gangs and stuff that maybe resembles it, but not as big of a factor. It looks like this is going to be Earth Kingdom focused, so we're probably not really expecting Dao Fei stuff here at all. Maybe some early signs of that stuff happening, but nothing particularly. In the previous video I did, someone in the comments actually interestingly brought up the idea that because Zito is this avatar who is all about like the deals he made sort of like as a diplomat, like as an accountant in a way, maybe he made it so that, money is kind of more of the important thing than loyalty, and that sort of is more of the dynamic. But it's obviously hard to speculate when we know so little about Zito. But something happened here that caused this to be the way things are. That people aren't really loyal. It's more about money, and especially when we have like seemingly the villains of the book being merchants. It would sort of make sense that maybe Zito has made it so that the wealthy merchants are like a huge kind of power of the era. So Yangchen has little reason to trust her council. I wonder why. So, we've sort of seen this before. They played on this dynamic in like the Kyoshi novels, that a lot of people, to gain like a higher position in the world, want to be sort of part of the Avatar entourage. Not necessarily because they super care about the Avatar and helping the world, but just because that's a good position to be in, connected to the Avatar. So maybe they're going to play on that dynamic here, that the people around her, for the most part, are more playing up the sort of celebrity aspect of the Avatar, and so on. So that's kind of interesting. Bin-Er, so new place we've never heard about in the Earth Kingdom before, on political business. So they're being quite general here. The preview doesn't even tell us much about what this business is necessarily going to be. But it speaks to the fact that, I guess, as we go in here, we're expecting I don't know, what are people thinking for like the age Yangchen will be throughout most of this book? I'm guessing they'll do a similar thing to Kyoshi, where she'll be somewhere in the region of like 17, 18, 19, 20, maybe 21. That seems like the general age range they're going to go for, given that it's YA. So for most of the book, I think she'll be in or around that. If she's traveling potentially on her own, I'd lean it towards it being maybe that she's slightly older than Kyoshi, given that it looks like she wants to do things on her own and is going against her council maybe to do a lot of this stuff. So, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, people seem to be agreeing with that. Yeah, early 20s, 17 to 21, 1921. Yeah, yeah, that's the general opinion. I can't see them changing it up that much more. So yeah, Kiyoshi's just like 18 by the end of the two Kiyoshi novels, so I think they might do it, just a little bit older, to fit Yang Chen, just to create a bit more of a dynamic with her. That they're still saying that she's inexperienced, but I think she'll be more experienced in terms of what to do as the Avatar than Kyoshi was, than Aang was, than Korra was. So I think she will be, in terms of one of the main focus avatars that we've seen, one of the ones who is much more, aware of what they need to do. So, an informant named Kavik. So this is the only real tease we have, I suppose, about other characters. The preview, of course, I think features at least one character who I think there'll be more focus on. But in terms of the kind of present day plot of the book, Kavik is the only character that we have mentioned here. Now, it's all about how the Earth Kingdom stuff. So, is he from the Earth Kingdom, or is he from maybe Water Tribe, as maybe the K's in his name would suggest? That's kind of the way maybe I'd be leaning with this, but who knows? That it could be interesting, just because, again, we don't know the political landscape of the world during this era, so we don't know how connected the Earth Kingdom is to the Water Tribes and so on, and so on. So there's that. Let's see, what's the chat have to say? FCE draws a lot from Escape from the Spirit World in his books. Well, I think you have to, because there's very little content ultimately that actually focuses on the previous four avatars, and so Yang Chen having one of those Escape from the Spirit World ones is something you have to use. You won't be able to rely on your past lives to help. You must rely on your friends. Let's see. Kavik has been heavily questioned by fans as to whether they're male, female, non-binary due to the lack of pronouns specified. I did notice that people were speculating about this. My reading of this is not that I would jump to thinking there's anything like that going on. I think the way they refer to the character is just that you know nothing about this character, so referring to them by name, twice that it happens, I don't think they refer to the character enough that they go really clear cut like this. But we'll see what they do. Maybe they will do that, and we'll see what they do. They say it's unlikely friendship deepens. Is that a tease of romance? Just because it's YA, so romance often does come up as a bit of a plot point, and I don't mind there being some romance in this, and especially because we don't really know much about Yang Chen's life. It would be interesting to see this get covered to some extent. So there we go. So what do we have here? Yeah. The city is ruled by corrupt Shang merchants who've become resentful of the mercurial Earth King and his whims. So we don't know the name of this Earth King. So, all we can generally kind of speculate about here is just that, okay, we have some of the numbers for Earth King, so we're probably somewhere here in the 30s of Earth King, and that's really all we can speculate about. This one is mercurial and has whims, so I guess just seemingly makes borderline random decisions without too much care for what they actually mean. So I'm guessing we'll learn little bits and pieces about this Earth King. I hope they give the number. I'd like them to give the number and not kind of cop out and not give it, but we'll see what happens there. to extract themselves from his influence. They have a solution in mind. So this is actually quite interesting in terms of this, is that the goal of the Shang merchants is just that they want to extract themselves from the influence of the Earth King. So it's not like they're trying to take over the Earth Kingdom here. They probably just want to make the city independent, kind of maybe disconnected from any rule by the Earth King. And so they're using this weapon to make that happen. So it's interesting in that it sort of creates a bit of a limited idea of what the villains want to do, but they're not saying too much ultimately. But here we go. A mysterious weapon of mass destruction that would place the power squarely in their hands. So what's it going to be? Technology in this era, again, about 100 years before Kyoshi, we're not thinking about anything, I suppose, too crazy here. Just because of it'd be weird for there to be sort of more advanced technology in the past. A lot depends on really when it comes from, in that is it something that happened that came from Wan Shitong's library, some of the schematics that were found in there. My speculation that I made in my video from before was that it is some sort of a kind of poisonous gas type thing, biological weapon. That way it would sort of make sense that I suppose merchants who have control over finding things that will be of value to the people, what if they just happen to come across some rare plant or something like that and realize that it has these special properties, and they can use it as a threat of, don't come into Bin or you will get hit by this gas and X will happen. That I think makes a little bit more sense than we have a rail gun pointed at you. It's a bit technology is a bit all over the place. So people have pointed out that the Legends RPG book mentions that one piece of technology that is available in the Kyoshi era is a gun. That there is a basic gun even in the Kyoshi era. The way it's described, it feels like going 100 years back, that a basic cannon is about the best you could get, and I don't think that's really what they're going to do. But so we'll see what happens here. Gas seems a little bit easy to defeat for an airbender. Well, if they're prepared for it, yes, they have the obvious counter for it, but all the characters still need to breathe. We saw this in Smoke and Shadow. The Kamurakage with their smoke were able to kind of get a little bit of advantage over Aang because they surround him, he's distracted doing something else, he stops focusing on, keeping the gas away from him. It can be tricky if that is indeed what they go for. It's not just an immediate, super obvious solution. So yeah, it's pure speculation at this point as to what it could or could not be. And then yeah, good point in chat there. Mysterious. Does it equal spiritual? That's an interesting point. Could it be something kind of spirit in nature? They're not going to go for the spirit kind of vine canon thing, but something maybe resembling that. I don't know. We don't really know a lot about the properties of the other stuff in the spirit world of what if you just like the plants or something like that in the spirit world? Are they weird? Do they act weirdly? I don't know. The one thing that maybe makes me just think it's not maybe some sort of a gas is just the whole mass destruction. Now, I know this is more of a technical term and it's less destruction as in buildings destroyed type thing, in that destruction just means general damage, and that is hurting people with a gas and stuff like that. But again, not too much to say. They seek to thwart the Shang's plan. Their unlikely friendship deepens. So it's an interesting one here. Obviously they come into contact because this is an informant and they happen to stay together longer. So they obviously, it's this thing that when they first meet, it seems like these two wouldn't get on, but then they actually do go get on together. Now, we'll get into more of this later as we get into more of the excerpt and stuff like that, but there's a few interesting things to talk about here. But for Yangchen, I've always found this bit of the description actually quite interesting. To chart her course as a singularly powerful avatar. Am I reading too much into the wording there of singularly powerful? In that, like, what exactly does it, like, are they trying to say there? Like, because they double down on it here with she must learn to rely on her own wisdom above all else. So they're trying to say that she wants to do things on her own, because it's unlikely friendship deepens, but that friendship might get in the way, distracts her from her goal to be powerful on her own. So quite interesting. So we'll get into some of this stuff later. I suppose because Zito is not mentioned in the description, the excerpt, she struggles to live up to his reputation. What he's like, and we're also going to find out what was he like as a past avatar. But what's the chat saying here? Maybe no team. Yes, I think that's what I'm leaning towards here. Is that I think all the experiences that she has from all the like hauntings of the past avatars leads to her making the decision to maybe not have companions herself, just in case she were to lose them, and that she feels that maybe she has to become powerful on her own so that she can stop things and save people, but that if she does happen to fail, there's no one close to her that like she's responsible maybe for losing. That's thematically what I think a lot of the excerpt is sort of going for. So I'm kind of intrigued to see how this is kind of going to work. She must rely on her own wisdom above all else. This seems to maybe link into this whole idea of she has little reason to trust her counsel, and loyalty is bought rather than earned. That she, being inexperienced in dealing with the way things are in this era, will actually give her a bit of a unique dynamic. So there we go. So that's quite interesting. But yeah, the Zito point. We obviously got a very positive, quick summary of what Zito was like as an avatar in Shadow of Kyoshi. It was basically presented by someone who basically works in the royal palace, his view on the history, and he was like freaking out about it. So you can get the idea. It's a little bit, I suppose, biased in overall, but we also get that most of what is presented by Zito is that he seemed heavily connected to the Fire Nation, even while he was the Avatar. I'm not immediately going to jump to, there's the problem right there, he never cared about the other nations, but I'm guessing it created a bit of a dynamic of that, because he was technically employed by the palace, effectively by the nation, that does create a bit of a different dynamic when it comes to dealing with the other nations. In that if he was a diplomat, it's kind of weird, like he's negotiating and he's meant to be sort of, in a way, sort of impartial as the Avatar, yet everyone is aware that like you're the minister in the Fire Nation. And you sort of wondered, like some of the stuff is mentioned in the description here of like loyalty bought rather than earned. Is Zito responsible for perhaps that happening? We often get the idea that each avatar kind of in a way leaves something behind that's unfinished, that they couldn't deal with. That's Wan's death, of course, the war between humanity, and you always have the sense that Aang had to resolve Roku's failing with Sozin. Korra had to deal with the legacy of Yakone, and so on. So, you know, Karuk had to deal with the legacy of Yangchen. Kyoshi has to deal with the legacy of Karuk. And what will we get here with this, because they're presenting the idea from the description. She has not yet earned the respect felt for Zito. And this, I'm wondering, will they do a thing like Kyoshi and Yang Chen, where Yang Chen has to tell Kyoshi that, hey, you have a very bad view of Karuk when Karuk had to do what he did because effectively of me. And just really opening that door, opening her eyes to the idea that you have too negative a view of Karuk and too positive a view of me. And there's always that sense of like balance to each avatar. So her just, I suppose, realizing that she's not perfect, he's not perfect will be helpful. But, you know, we'll see what goes on here. There's also the sense that, perhaps Zito, in doing everything that he did, also maybe didn't deal much with spirits or something like that. And so maybe that's why there's extra pressure on Yang Chen to deal with spirits. That could be something. Let's see, maybe one of Zito's faults as an avatar might be similar to Aang's fault of not being helped the Southern Water Tribe gain independence. Yeah, because one thing with Yang Chen we know, I think I have this down here. She goes on to be known as one of the great avatars, known for creating peace treaties, deals with the spirits. The human treaties end up being successful to the point where, like, they are still valid in Kyoshi's era, but the spirit dealings are the ones that sort of fall apart over time. Kind of impossible to maintain over the centuries and the generations and stuff like that. That could be quite interesting. Plot twist. Karuk is a past avatar companion and a figment of her imagination. That would be pretty crazy, but probably not a high likelihood of that actually happening. So that's Zito. Then we also have Salai. I think everyone's expecting that we'll learn something more about Salai in this book. Hopefully enough that we can actually say something about this avatar beyond just that Salai was great. And that's really it. It was cool to get the name, but it's weird that we learn more about the new avatar, Avatar Gun, than we do about the avatar we previously knew about, Avatar Salai. But we'll see what goes on here. Like, is Salai this Earth avatar here? Because I do lean towards, like, I think the name feels kind of Earth Kingdom-esque. I think it's either Earth Kingdom or Fire Nation would be my interpretation of the name. But I tend to lean maybe Earth Kingdom, perhaps, and that it maybe is Avatar Gimli here. But it could be anyone, really. I do think, though, with the avatars they're focusing on, they are trying to keep it all roughly within range of where we are now. So I don't think Salai or Avatar Gun go back, like, too far. I still think we're probably within, like, the kind of 4 before Yang Chen here with both of these characters, ultimately. Just because in the text, it's like I said here, Avatar Gun doesn't seem to be massively far back in the cycle, given the way the info of that era is discussed, in that it's like a quite detailed, sort of technical book on, like, water systems and stuff like that. They make a note about how that one actually is a book and not, like, done on bamboo and stuff like that. So I don't think we're going massively far back. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's like this character and, like, one of these ones in the back that we have there. But I don't know. How do you guys think over the course of the book they'll use sort of Yang Chen's, like, affliction, the plaguing of voices? In the present day, I guess she's maybe learned how to deal with it, but we seem to get the impression that it just will continue to happen. So what's going to happen here? Like, I assume we'll get into a situation where it happens and Kavik is the only one there. And she might have to explain to Kavik that, okay, this is what happened here. Next time it happened, this is how you should handle it. Just try and figure out maybe who it is. Talk to me, calm me down, or something like that. It could actually create a bit of an interesting dynamic as the book goes on, in terms of, like the excerpt kind of talks about, if the wrong experience happens and like the wrong conversation basically is relayed through her, she's like terrified, in pain and anger and grief. So if it happens at the wrong time, it could be really, really bad. So it's a kind of interesting dynamic for Yang Chen, where she kind of wants to do things on her own, but kind of needs people around her. So that's kind of interesting overall. But yeah, we do have a few things to sort of maybe lean into how this is actually happening, because the Kyoshi books play on this, and then I suppose you can also bring in how Aang contacts Korra in book 1, which is that they kind of explain that if an avatar isn't spiritual or is not open to a connection, a past life can sort of force it and make it happen, but it can be painful for the present avatar to experience that. That's what happens with Korra. She's not spiritual, so Aang has to sort of force the vision through in moments where she kind of goes unconscious, until she finally truly makes the connection. And then like Karuk trying to get through to Kyoshi nearly like knocks her out off the bison into the water and stuff like that. So this seems like it's that, but there's nothing blocking it at all. It just happens, and she is free and easy to be possessed by the past avatars. So it speaks to the idea that, I guess, like, she is spiritual, as we find out from the excerpt. But why is this happening? Especially because it would suggest that the past lives want her to experience this. That based on previous examples, there's that sense that Karuk needed to tell Kyoshi something. Aang needed to tell Korra something. But all the examples that they give here, does Yang Chen need to experience all of this? Or is this something that sort of gets filtered out with a typical avatar? I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, what would be so important that they're trying to reach Yang Chen, all this time since her childhood? Yeah, like that's the big point of this, in that there's one obvious connection, and it's this whole line here. Like, are they trying to warn her that this is about to happen to her? That's why she keeps getting a lot of these kind of, terrifying ones of avatars losing their companions. Is that what's happening? Because this is my main takeaway in terms of, obviously, FCE is writing all 3 of these books. He wrote the Kyoshi novels, he's writing the Yang Chen book. This line, I feel, is in the Kyoshi books for a reason. And the excerpt connects, I think, quite strongly to this idea of Yang Chen lost 2 close friends / bending teachers who died protecting her from her enemies. Like, when did this happen? And it's interesting that the whole Avatar Gun thing with Maso's from the excerpt, which we'll get to, is Gun losing a close friend. So she seems to get these warnings and stuff like that. So the question, I suppose, to chat here is, this event, has it already happened? Or is it going to happen over the course of the book? I think this is a key one, because I think this will get referenced again. It feels too obvious that it kind of connects in. And especially because, at least to me, it feels like that the death flags are going up quite heavily for Jetson here, in terms of like close friends, bending teachers, and then she's talking about how Jetson is like the most important person in the world to her, effectively. There's Master Boma from the Rift, but it's very unclear about like who exactly he is. Like, he's not an air nomad, I don't believe. So is he like her earthbending teacher, or was he just a guy there to help her during that situation in the Rift with that section of the Earth Kingdom? I'm not really sure, but this will create a bit of an interesting dynamic, as we'll get to with Jetson, in terms of like, if the character's dead, then there's your reason for why she struggles to connect to people potentially, and wants to be on her own if she's lost the person closest to her. If she's still alive, it maybe speaks to why aren't they kind of together. So question in chat, who is Avatar Gun? Okay, I suppose I should bring up the excerpt here to go over this stuff before we go through all of the speculation. So we'll spend some time going through the, this is the, at least as far as the article says, this is the prologue chapter and all of chapter 1. Especially chapter 1 doesn't feel particularly long, so I'm not sure if it's the whole chapter 1, but at the very least this is the start of the book. So we do actually have some pages here. So you can see here, I've noted this, so some of the key points, so we don't have to kind of read it like straight through, because I've already sort of done that already. So we obviously get introduced to Jetson here. Voices of the Past is the name of the chapter, to get across that the whole plagued by voices thing is an important dynamic. So the key point though here is the girl was back in the infirmary being watched by the elders. Her cries of pain sprang from every surface bouncing off the hard stone. So this is Yangchen. This is Yangchen going through one of these plaguings by a past avatar. It gets explained later on, so we'll go into this as we go through. So Jetson, who is close to Yangchen, as we get, she sped past her sisters. We're in the Western Air Temple here. So that makes sense. You can see there's a few nice references here with the upside down construction of the temple. So all of that is very nice, fits in with what we know. 3,000 foot drop. She doesn't have her glider with her, but she makes the jump anyway. So it shows the sort of desperation of the situation here, that they do view this as being Yangchen in trouble. So we get this section here where she goes to the Great Library, where we meet this new character, Sering, chief caretaker of the books. So it's happening again. So this thing happening to Yangchen has happened before, and this is where we get the reference to. She just says, Masseuse. So just a name or what. And this is what they try to figure out. Like, so Jetson asks the keeper of the library, like, okay, do you know what's going on here? And they're like, oh, that could be this person, the famous scholar of the Ru Ming era. There's also a village in Huzin of the same name. It might be named after a founder. Or it could just be some random person. They're just trying to figure out from, obviously, Yangchen has said this name, and they're trying to make the connection here. So Jetson just goes like, it kind of has to be the first one, doesn't it? Because the avatars tend to run in exalted circles. So I like this point here of, like, she lists off all these ideas of who this could be, and it's just like, it's the most famous one, isn't it? Yeah, of course. Of course the avatar knew this kind of famous scholar. Makes sense. So she directs her to where she'll find the information about this, and we just get this interesting thing here, like the whole idea. Northwest corner, Ru with the 3 drops of water radical. So Ru Ming era. This relates to, I think, the whole in Wan Shi Tong's library, the kind of calendar, kind of planetarium thing. It mentions sort of the names of all the eras. It obviously, I don't think we necessarily have the full information to piece together everything that it means, but it's just the way they organize the books of, like, okay, it's a book from this era, you'll find it over here. That's what they're talking about here. So yeah, they get the book, and Jetson is heading back. So we get, this is the only shot that they really have. Use your glider next time. So we find out that back here, Yangchen is 8 years old. That's when this is actually happening. So that's quite interesting. The girl's thrashing had settled into sobs. So not the involuntary shaking or a fever, but rather a deliberate motion born of steady, all-consuming anguish. So this is the extent to which these plaguings, hauntings, happen with Yangchen. It is full on possession. Like, imagine what happens when, like, say, I suppose Kyoshi takes over Aang's body in 205, except it's to relay this tragic story, and the current avatar feels every bit of that emotion. That's kind of what's happening here. We get the name of the abbess, Dagmola. So it is interesting here in that it's clear that the two older nuns are aware that Jetson is the one who has the very strong connection to Yangchen. I suppose just in chat, I mentioned this in the podcast when we discussed it, that they never say how old Jetson is, just that she is clearly older than Yangchen. As we'll get in the second chapter, she's the one to guide her into the spirit world for the first time. But where are you guys picturing how old Jetson is? Given that here Yangchen is 8, like, are we thinking Jetson is like 18 at this point, 20s, or are we just talking about the idea that, say, like, the other characters are like more in their like 50s or something like that, and Jetson's actually like 30 or something. So I definitely think she's somewhat young, just because they play up the idea that, like, oh, hey, you forgot your glider, and she hops over the upside down buildings with no real kind of issues. So I'm guessing it's enough that they're not like super close in age, but that, you know, they feel like they're maybe a generation apart. That's where I'm kind of leaning. So there we go. 3 to 7 years older, maybe 10 years older. Jetson late teens. Yeah, it feels like it probably has to be at least that, where like she's probably at least double Yangchen's age back here. That's the way I'd interpret it as well. Because I think if she was really, really young, I'm not sure if the abbess and the librarian would necessarily leave Jetson to do a lot of this like on her own. So I think she's old enough that they like trust Jetson to handle this herself, which is interesting. So yeah, too many people ruined the effect. She reads out the book. So this is the dynamic that we get here, is that you can calm Yangchen down as she goes through this by basically doing things that are familiar to the situation that Yangchen is like experiencing. So when they figure out who the avatar is talking to, they try to talk as if they are that person. So it's very interesting what we get here. So you can see here, she just reads out a section from the book, and then Yangchen relaxes and says, "Half a year, and that's as far as you've gotten. You have to stop taking on so many projects at once, CC." So this gets across that this Masos, I don't know the pronunciation, was familiar with whichever avatar is coming through Yangchen. We later find out it is Avatar Gun. They obviously are on nickname terms with each other, so that's kind of interesting. So it goes back to reading the book, and we get the first idea. They had no clue what was happening initially. They just tried to comfort her as best that they could, but then they started to realize that the words were not just gibberish, that they actually meant something. They were sentences, names, slices of conversations, and what really got them onto this was that Yangchen was talking to His Majesty the Earth King Zolai, a man she'd never met who died 3 centuries ago. So that's quite an interesting one. There we go, an Earth King from 300 years before Yangchen. So that's something to note. That's quite interesting. They take notes about this, and then we get this information dump here. The names: Angalurk, Preu, Yotogawa, names from every nation, names of past Avatar companions. And I think this is the interesting part about this, that maybe might make it slightly complicated for us to get tons of information about like the past avatars themselves, because unless we get someone directly interacting with Yang Chen as she goes through this, we might learn more about the companions rather than the avatar themselves. So there's a way around it. Like I said, if Kavik is going to be around her, he can relay stuff and find that out. We just want to learn anything we can. But yeah, it's going to be cool. Like if we do get situations where they figure out that, like, oh my god, I'm talking to Avatar Salai here, and so on. But they do mention this. Not every phantom the child spoke to had made it to the annals of history. Some were never acknowledged as having close ties to the Avatar. Jetson could only imagine the stories lost to time, filtering through the girl, merest fragments sticking in her throat. So in this sense, there's a bit of an interesting thing where, like, Yang Chen, what's happening to her is actually somewhat useful from a historical point of view to maybe make these connections to past avatars and realize that, oh, this ancient avatar was actually very close with this world leader or this random person. And, it's kind of highlighting that they're learning stuff that they never knew about past avatars from the history that they actually do know. So really fascinating stuff. Conversations were pleasant frequently enough. Laugh with friends in towns that had been, that's a good point. Towns that had been renamed. So they're just acknowledging that things have changed over the years. And not everything has remained the same, but they sort of from history roughly know that, like, oh, this used to be this place and so on. The success of legendary winter hunts, meditate with someone else's inner peace. But then we get the whole idea here. Waking nightmares, bouts of sorrow and rage that threatened to tear her apart. She wouldn't mutter names but scream them as if she'd been betrayed by the universe itself. By accident, they discovered she could sometimes be calmed by figuring out the past figure she was talking to when it was possible and speaking back to her from that perspective. The deeper the better. The familiarity was the best bomb that they had. So this is, I suppose, going to be a key one over the course of the book, is that people being around Yang Chen, that she's going to have to relay to them that this is the best way to handle her when these things happen, if they happen to her at bad moments. So Yang Chen falls asleep at this point. How is she? Better. And here's where we get the reveal here. Who was Masoze? A companion of Avatar Gun. Skilled poet and engineer who died in Ha'an when Gun failed to hold back a tsunami. So, very interesting stuff here. So, obviously, this character, Masoze, has gone down as being a noted sort of scholar, but specifically as a poet and engineer. And they know that this character died in this place when Gun tried to defend this town from a tsunami. So, very interesting and kind of, reminiscent of scenes that we've seen before in terms of, say, like, Roku's death. Ultimately died trying to save his home island from a volcano. These things have happened, before, as we know. And yeah, Jetson gets across the whole idea here of, like, failed, not the choice of words she would have used for someone, bravely confronting a force of nature. Han still stood today as a port when it sounded like it could have been wiped off the map along with everyone who lived there. It's what's written. After Masoze drowned, Gun disappeared for a while before returning to duty. So straight away we're learning more about Avatar Gun than we learned about like Salai. It's not quite as much as Zito, but it's a more personal incident than I think nearly anything we learn about Zito. So very interesting overall. And again, will we learn more? There's obviously the weird thing of, like, it's cool that we're learning about past avatars, but without being able to fit them in where in the cycle they are, it gets a little bit, like, kind of tricky and awkward in terms of, like, what nation are they from? And so on. So there's that. So yeah, You were grieving. If the waters that Gun fought were the same as the ones that killed Masose, then the girl and the past life raging through her might have personally witnessed their friend take their last breath before plunging below the waves. They would have searched for a body in the wreckage. So this explains the heavy, heavy emotion that Yang Chen is going through as she's basically sort of being held down in this kind of crazy situation. What if I've done things differently? Perhaps Gun was the one who demanded the label of failure. So that's very interesting, because that is how a lot of avatars view a failing, them not being powerful enough to stop something from happening. And this is why Escape from the Spirit World is so important, because watching that as like a series, all the stories that are told to Aang are about avatars failing. An event where each avatar failed, struggled, and then Yang Chen wraps up Escape from the Spirit World by making the key point that there's a reason the avatar is human at their core and not an all-powerful spirit being who can't ever be wrong, is that they need to understand what it is to be human to be able to be a good avatar. And sort of this emotion that happens here because of these failures is kind of key to know why it's important to keep going, keep trying, and in a way, why the cycle even exists in the first place. So I like the sort of kind of thought process here of Jetson realizing that sort of noting it down in history as simply Avatar Gun failed to hold back a tsunami is maybe not the most polite way of saying what actually happened. So, pretty good stuff overall. It was simply unjust. To remember the events of a single life was painful enough. Reliving dozens of lives, well, it would be like getting caught by a tsunami, swept away by forces beyond your control. She's a smart kid. If she's having these visions, she'll figure out who she is long before she turns 16. So we get, and this is the reveal. It's right here at the end of this chapter is the first time they directly confirm that this little 8-year-old girl is Yang Chen. So that's quite interesting. What are we going to do with you? So they're just getting across that Yang Chen, another avatar who sort of discovered the truth before 16 and the usual kind of way of doing things. There we go. Then we go into the first chapter here. So you can see here we skip ahead to Yang Chen at 11, and straight away had known who she was for a while on an intellectual level, and treated her avatarhood with a child's seriousness at the behest of her elders. It's an important secret, all right, like Sering's custard recipe. Best not to talk about it until we've figured a few more things out. So she basically knows, but she's not being like super, I suppose, vocal about it here. But everyone pretty much knows what the situation is. So the involuntary bouts of vivid memory still occurred. So that's very important. It doesn't go away in the 3 years following that incident. The ease with which the past avatar slipped into Yang Chen's speech troubled the leaders of the Western Temple. She would eavesdrop on their discussions about her, and that's what happens here. She basically overhears Jetson talking and sort of, saying that this is what they do for her. And it's basically just getting across that they'll support her. That's what they're going to do. They have to help her get through this because that's all they really can do. As if Yang Chen needed another reason to worship her older sister. And then just in case anyone latched onto this a little bit too hard, Jetson wasn't related to her by blood, because that's the whole dynamic here. And like they still go a little bit into the technicalities of like, likely there are some actual blood relations between all these Air Nomad characters, but it's not particularly known. So there's that. So here we go. Doesn't really matter. The girl who cut up a fruit in a stupid way, but at least gave you symmetrical pieces, was your sister. The girl who showed you no mercy on the airball court and laughed in your faces was your sister. Jetson was either the person who would listen to Yang Chen cry with utmost patience, or the one who'd upset her in the first place. I think something like that gets across that they probably are somewhat close in age to have this connection. So it'll be interesting to find out more about Jetson as we go on. Yeah, perfect sense that Jetson would guide her on her first attempt at meditating into the spirit world. I like the description here. A guide was an anchor as much as a pathfinder, a calling voice in the darkness. Don't have so many expectations. Not everyone has the ability to cross realms. You won't be more or less of an avatar or an air nomad or a person if it doesn't happen. And this is key. This is very key in terms of, like, I suppose, how Yangchen views Jetson. If you did it, I can do it. But what she's thinking is, if you did it, I need to do it to become more like you. So really getting across that she looks up to her older sister here, and so on. Flicked Yangchen on the forehead where her arrow point would eventually be. So, of course, it makes sense. If she's only 11 here, Yangchen can't have her arrow tattoos because Aang and then later Jinora are the youngest to get the arrow tattoos. So that's important for continuity, but they do it well here. And then they get across that they're going to do the guide situation here in the Western Air Temple, not at the Eastern Air Temple like it happened with Jinora and Korra. And I like the mention here, like, in a way, the back and forth between the different temples, a little bit of a rivalry here of, like, the extra sanctity of the Eastern Temple was more reputation and less proven truth. And then, yeah, interesting point there in chat. I thought it was extremely rare for them to go into the spirit world. That is in the Kyoshi novel. So it's clear that something changes between the Yangchen era and the Kyoshi era, where it seems like potentially a lot of them have the ability to do this, because they're talking about how the older nuns are kind of like, yeah, it makes sense for Jetson to do it, but that theoretically loads of them could have helped her be the guide. But in the Kyoshi era, Kelsang, it's a shock. It's a surprise. The higher ups at the temples can't believe, almost struggle to believe, struggle to accept that Kelsang can actually meditate into the spirit world. So it's very interesting to see why that change happens in like 100 or so years, where the like air nomads go from being able to, like, potentially a lot of them meditate into the spirit world and know a lot about it, to being unbelieving of anyone with that ability. So I guess it is related to Yangchen and what happens with the spirits, potentially. And just maybe some of those connections get damaged. It affects general spirituality, or how tricky it is to get across. Kind of interesting to see how, if they tackle that at all. So we move on. So this is where they're going to be doing it. And yeah, Giant just says, it feels like a giant is about to grab me or let you go. A hand either opens or closes, but it can't do either of those twice in a row. So just some wisdom there, whatever you take from that. So yeah, Abbess, Dagmola, and Librarian Sereng had come along and had relegated themselves to assistance. There was no hesitance by the two older women in deferring to Jetson as a guide, which I think kind of gets across the idea that either Jetson is very notable, that she is very spiritual and capable of doing this, so they don't have any problem letting her doing it, or that they all are actually capable of doing it. So there we have that. So yeah, the session began. We have an incense and a lot of the sort of ritual aspects surrounding this. But we get the transition here happening here. When she opened her eyes, the light was intense but not blinding. The colors were brighter. And she's in the spirit world. So very cool stuff here. And the key point from this is this. Yangchen had performed a feat of avatarhood. It had not happened to her involuntarily. It had not struck her down like thunder between her temples. It had not racked painfully through her limbs to damage the landscape. She'd done it. She had done it. Her victory, and best of all, her favorite person in the world, was right there to share in her moment. First try. So this is a kind of key moment in that I suppose Yang Chen deep down maybe felt that, oh, like, am I a broken avatar because of how my connection to the past lives works and how she can't control that? But it actually seems to be the case that, no, actually she's really, really talented and can do a lot of these things relatively easily. Seems to be on her path to becoming a master airbender at a relatively young age. And she goes into the spirit world first try. It's literally just this issue that she seems to have with the hauntings of the past avatars. That's the problem. So again, it speaks to, someone so talented, like, is she too talented? Is it the permanently on thing? Who knows? Maybe I only remembered how. Humility isn't more important than the truth. I think you pulled this off yourself. So there we go. And then there's some cool thing. Winged whales, translucent and jelly-like, a bouncing mushroom. Maybe it's friendly. Spores, twinkling fireflies. What do we do now? So I like that. That's clearly a reference to sort of like Korra era spirit world. And I like when they do that sort of like cross series thing, that they don't feel the need to show the spirit world, even though we're way back in time, as being the places Aang went to. It can be the usual place from before. Yeah, there we go. Spores. There it is, the mysterious weapon. That's what the Shang merchants harness, the spores. No, not really, because they basically say they become spirits, but who knows? Maybe it is something like that. But we'll see where they go with this. What do we do now? And I really like this little conversation that happens here. Yang Chen just wanting to know, okay, we're here. Now what? And Jetchinzer says, we don't do anything. There is no use to the spirit world. And therein lies the great lesson. Here you don't take, you don't anticipate or plan, you don't struggle, you don't worry about value gained or lost. You just exist like a spirit. That's key, because I feel like it's almost weird that the series has never made this statement in a way before. That at least, I suppose, a neutral analysis of the spirit by someone who is spiritual is that is what the spirits do. They just exist. That is how it is. That there's no goal necessarily. The spirits don't really try to set out to accomplish things like most humans do. I'd like to see this explored a little bit more, especially because right now it seems like Yang Chen is set up to be incredibly spiritual and things going really well. She has an amazing teacher who seems to know what the key dynamic with the spirits is. It's interesting that it seems to kind of go somewhat wrong. Now, based on what we know about Yang Chen's dealing with the spirits, she talks to them, she's able to make deals with them. It's just that the deals that she makes fit if, like, are there's the potential for them to be kept for a very long amount of time. It's just not very feasible that they be kept for that long time. And the whole plot of the rift with Old Iron, that makes sense of, like, it's this ritual that you try to tie into air nomad culture. But how could Yang Chen have predicted that all the air nomads get wiped out? And that's kind of why that promise gets broken. And then I assume it's just things like that across the different places where these all happen. She can't guarantee that the exact same people will always live in this spot and will always agree to this thing she agreed with the spirit. And I think there's the ultimate takeaway that the deals were always meant to sort of like ultimately, so I suppose, favor humans rather than the spirits. So there's that aspect to it as well. So it's a tough one because like what's stated here, it's that theoretically the spirits just want to exist. They don't want anything other than, like, I guess, if you're Heibai, you are the spirit who basically looks after this forest. That's a very simple thing. That's all you want. And so the more complex side of things is sort of that like, but these people live near the forest, you know. Like it's a complex dynamic. There's obviously the weird situation with this where, and I've always said this about the human spirit dynamic of like, the spirits have their own world. Why the connection of a spirit to a specific place when this is the physical world? Now, a lot of this is that like we don't really see, say, humans attempt to live full time in the spirit world, and the spirits seem surprisingly protective of their own place in that regard. So I always have felt there's been a little bit of imbalance in that the spirits are somewhat arrogant ultimately with regards to they feel they are a higher form of being, and so look down on all humans and see like and think in a way that they should get their way. But Yangchen, I suppose, in creating these deals, lent more towards giving humans what they wanted, and that was a bit of a problem. But it speaks to what is the correct approach to balance between humans and spirits. How do you actually handle this? Because I think in a lot of the content that we get, I do feel it leans from a writing perspective towards humans are selfish and humans are the problem, when I don't really feel it ever gets brought up that spirits are kind of also a bit of the problem. That they want the physical world, but they don't want to like do stuff to keep it that way, because they expect it to just be that way forever, because spirits are stagnant and never want to change, whereas humans are all about change. And that's why I always like the Rift. I think the Rift is probably, for me, one of the best portrayals of spirits, with the more closed-off spirit being represented by Old Iron, and a spirit with a slightly different perspective of Lady Tianhai, actually being someone who sees the positive of humans that I don't think a lot of other spirits do. And that is that humans do create. That, yes, change can be bad, but it can also be very good as well. In that there's a slight sense of, okay, you're protecting this location, but this location could be so much more if you let it evolve a little bit. And there's always those type of situations. And that's for me sort of the problem with, like, say, like the Korra stuff, even into Turf Wars, is that the spirits do feel like they're just presented like cranky old people who just, like, you know, kind of get off my lawn type thing of like, get out of my forest, get out of my spirit world. And that's as simple as it actually is. Ultimately, what I want, more spirit characters who speak. That's one of my main things that I want. That's why I did really value that from the Legend RPG game. The little reveal, the subtle reveal that Wan Shi Tong is actually planning to give humans a second chance is actually really, really important. Because I think we need a spirit like him who can talk and has maybe seen the positives and negatives of humanity to be involved in the discussion that I guess Korra is probably going to have to deal with as things go on, especially now that we have a central spirit portal. But that was a bit of a sidebar, but it's all related, because Yangchen's core issue is, of course, the mistakes that she made related to how she attempted to deal with the spirits and how she didn't quite get it right. Can we explore? Yes, we can. And they go off together. Now, it's relatively short here. I suppose it just about feels like a chapter. Maybe it is just a very quick opening chapter. Maybe there's a bit more. Because I'm kind of wondering, like, does something happen in the spirit world from here? Or are we just kind of... it goes well? Is that what they're kind of getting at here? Yeah. That's a good point by Lauren in the chat there, that the way the spirits are presented in book 4 of Korra, I think makes them look really bad. That they don't help the city that they want to ultimately live in, and then the second the conflict is over, they're back. as in like, hey, thanks for solving this for us. We're back now. Um, that's always been a bit of a issue for me with them. But that's where we end it. So I suppose, obvious question. Do you think that was all of chapter 1? Or is there more to this? And then is chapter 2 straight into teenage young adult Yangchen? I think it probably will be. I think this is roughly the structure that the Rise of Kyoshi took, where it had a bit of a prologue chapter and then relatively quickly jumped into kind of teenage Kyoshi. So there's that. Because the only thing I can think of is like, is there any way that there's a whole second half of this chapter that is like dark spirit attack in the spirit world and Jetson and someone else, like who else is with them, Sering, like die, and maybe this is that moment or something like that? I don't think it would, because I think it's presented as the two bending teachers killed by enemies, and I don't think they're presenting spirits as enemies, but it would be interesting if it's all positive and then she sees a dark spirit thing happen, and we get the issue sort of presented, that maybe she encounters a spirit, tries to talk to it, and it doesn't go so well, or something like that. That would be somewhat interesting. So there's that. So yeah, I definitely think it's relatively short, because you can see here this is like what, 9 out of 14 sort of pages here in this document. So yeah, it feels like it's half the length of the first one. There's probably maybe a little bit more to it, but I wonder what else there is. Back to this. We talked about this Western Air Temple, the hauntings, why it's happening. We roughly got to that. Now, some of the other stuff about Yangchen that I'm hoping they'll get to eventually is that the Kyoshi books through Lao Ge present the idea that Yangchen is a devoted reader of Guru Shoken, and it's said that she also studied his opponents, which would be Guru Lahima as well. So Yangchen has read Shoken, has read Lahima. It's unclear if that happens later on in her life or she's already done that. I'm guessing there'll probably be a little bit of this if we want to, I suppose, have a little bit more of a nuanced character. So in terms of, okay, she's read these books by these people, how does that change her? So they're known for being kind of relatively extreme, I suppose, philosophers. Lahima saying instinct is a lie told by a fearful body hoping to be wrong. Let go your earthly tether, enter the void, empty and become wind. So again, that is the sort of philosophy of how you get airbending flight, which is taking the air nomad ideals to their absolute extremes of having a void of like emotion, a void of attachment, like being attached to literally nothing, not having any real kind of thing left to care about. That's how you're forever off the ground. So quite extreme there. New growth cannot exist without first the destruction of the old. So again, Zahir of course used that one and based his philosophy around Lahima. Shoken is actually quite interesting. This stuff is all from like Korra book 3. This stuff is from the Kyoshi novels. So one of the only real quotes that we get about Shoken is this: if you meet the spirit of enlightenment on the road, slay it. And it goes on to sort of cover this and how Lao Ge effectively says that Kyoshi is like one step away from representing quite perfectly Guru Shoken's ideals and what is said by this statement. And she goes on to sort of think in her mind that like, is this how I want to be as the Avatar? Like heartlessness as like the new enlightenment, murder as a form of like self-discovery. The meaning behind this line here is basically effectively don't listen to people who try to, tell you the right way to do things, that like you are the one who make your own decisions. So that's what it's kind of trying to get at here is don't let anything get in your way. The only good advice kind of comes from yourself in a way. So it's difficult to know how she necessarily takes that fully into play, because Yangchen stuff that we see later on, I don't think you can really read too much into the Rift, because I think the Rift is very plot focused. I think Yangchen is there doing her role as the Avatar. We get a little bit of the spirit dynamic connection, but I don't think we really see too much of like her and her personality come out through that book. How she is with Aang when she talks to him as like a past Avatar thing, is quite interesting. Again, she kind of has a little bit of a kind of philosopher style to her, with like I talked about the escape from the spirit world thing, about the advice of, there's a reason an Avatar is human. You need to learn about your failures to kind of be human. Like failure is part of that. And then the finale advice that she gives to Aang is interesting, because even though she herself is an air nomad, she also effectively gives Aang the advice of, well, I don't know about this line turtle thing you have going on, so my opinion is that you probably do need to sacrifice your own spiritual needs and put the fate of the world first. That's the kind of Avatar philosophy. So she feels that, I suppose, she would be able to do that, which is kind of interesting. But again, this is not her like embracing this, because that is embracing the idea of, okay, she's able to let go of like her attachment to her air nomad beliefs, but it's her fully embracing the Avatar beliefs, the connections you need to be as the Avatar, which is to sort of be connected to the world. So she knows about these at the very least. She's not adverse to reading things that she disagrees with. So I don't know how this will necessarily come through. The big question, though, will we see Lao Ge, Tieguai the Immortal, under either of these names or under a different name in the Yangchen books? I kind of feel like this is sort of like FCE's kind of big idea, his kind of pet character in a way, that this is going to be one of these things that we maybe follow in these books, is that this character will potentially appear in kind of everything going forward. I just have a feeling that might be how they go about this. So I don't know, will they use Lao Ge? Will it be Tieguai? Perhaps. I'm thinking they probably go Tieguai, just so we know, and you have to make the connection that like Lao Ge was also known as Tieguai. I think that's probably the way they'll do it. How about Legao as a cover name? Yep, that's definitely how to do it. So there's that. I doubt this really will come into play, but this is just, again, Yao Ping is the place where Yangchen does her Avatar state airbending thing. Will we see Yao Ping? Maybe. Who knows? There's that. We talked about this. Peace treaties. Again, she is... the plot of the book happens because she's there on political business, trying to figure things out. So maybe the net result of this book is that she creates some sort of a peace treaty between maybe the Earth King and Bin It'd be nice to kind of get that, see the Yangchen, the negotiator, sort of like step into the spotlight a little bit. That would be nice. The Rift, I suppose we have to cover this a little bit. This is just things that could potentially happen, because the Rift was Yangchen's first mission as the Avatar after completing her training. So I'm assuming the book is going to be set after that. So the Rift has already happened. She's had her first mission. This stuff has happened. But it is interesting to follow this, and I wonder will they make these references. Tianhai's husband, the king of the old powerful Earth Kingdom city, which will one day become Cranefish Town and later United Republic, he should still be alive at this point. If it's only a handful of years after that, this character, who is this ancient king, the last we heard about him, should still be alive. And then part of the deal with Old Iron that is made in that book is that the land has to return to its natural state. So could we see the city being taken down and conflict surrounding the people needing to relocate? Again, it depends on how long it's happened, but you have to remember that the powerful Earth Kingdom city was, it felt like they were presenting it as like potentially the third biggest city in the Earth Kingdom, that this was going to be a powerhouse, and now it has to go away as part of this deal. So this shouldn't be here, actually. This is from before, because at least in my opinion, I'm now leaning towards the kind of other people on the cover with Yangchen is meant to represent the spirits of the past avatars, I think. At least that's the way I'm interpreting it, rather than like randomly there's some Shang merchants on the cover. So there's that. So yeah, I'm wondering will they even reference any of this stuff overall. Let's see. Boma is definitely on the cover in Jungsan Chang's sketches, and FCE has made comic references. Is that confirmed? Master Boma is on the cover? Because like I do think the first character up front looks sort of like Zito, just not in his red attire with the hat and stuff like that. Thematically, I think that would make the most sense, at least right now when we don't know any of the characters. That would make sort of sense to me. Yeah, I suppose Boma could be the guy in the middle. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't remember seeing any sort of confirmation about like that or sketches and stuff like that. But I don't think I've looked into if the artist put up any like extra information about the cover. I checked in like FCE. I don't think. FCE hasn't acknowledged the book on Instagram, but like it's been very interesting to see that he hasn't said like barely anything about it. So there's that. So, okay, there's a version of the cover on the illustrator's website, and the guy in the middle has features a lot closer to comic Boma. Okay, that's interesting. That makes somewhat sense. It makes sense to like play on that dynamic and utilize the characters that you already have of like Boma, because I guess he was involved in Yangchen's last mission. It would make sense that he comes into play here to some degree. But that's that. So yeah, I think that's most of the speculation that I have about the book. It's a little bit maybe unfortunate just that like the preview that we get doesn't include a chapter of like present day Yangchen, because it still feels like we don't have that much of a sense for like how she's going to be characterized. And that's probably the big thing for me, is that I'm very interested to see how this book goes, given that we now have a whole other book series to compare it to, and how Yangchen is as a lead character compared to how Kyoshi was. I think Kyoshi worked because we sort of had like a sense perhaps for what our dynamic was going to be, because people latched onto the whole she wants to kill people kind of dynamic, and so that maybe hinted at like a harsh upbringing or something like that, and so the book really delivered on what was going on with that. With Yangchen, I'm very interested to see, like, is she basically portrayed as just sort of standard airbender avatar, or will there be a little bit more of an edge to her in terms of some of these dynamics? Like, on a day-to-day basis, how does the plaguing affect her? How does, like, I suppose, having experienced so much pain through these memories, how does that affect her? Is that why she tends to want to go out on her own? Has the event from the past where people have died already happened? And then, like, the whole philosophy aspect, like, does she have a little bit of an edge to her with some of this stuff? That's what I'm intrigued about, because I feel it might be a little bit difficult to, in a way, have this character challenge Kyoshi as, like, new favorite avatar type thing. Will they be able to characterize Yangchen interestingly enough to kind of beat out Kyoshi by being a very different character? Not sure. So what do we have here? Do you think we're going to get another excerpt before release? Based on previous books, perhaps not. Maybe closer to release, we might get a sample of the audiobook. That might happen, but I think that will be much closer to release. But perhaps the one thing I will say is that they might put out something else closer to release to hype it up, just because since the last book, Chronicles the Avatar is a thing, and it's very interesting that they haven't actually, like, properly, like, explained what it is. I get it, it's sort of self-explanatory in that it's just the title for what all the novels are together. But it's kind of weird that it just sort of happened, and, like, the Kyoshi novels are now merged into this series that they are a part of because they were first, but they aren't really part of. And then also, they've never come out and said if we're getting multiple Yangchen books. Which I suppose there's a question for chat there. Do you think we're getting a second Yangchen book, or will book 4 be a different avatar, or what? Because with the Kyoshi books, the second they were announced, we knew it was a Kyoshi duology. That was the first of 2. With this, it's just book 3. I assume they'll do 2, and just they'll keep it that way. That way you get your sort of intro book where you jump in with the character, and then you get a second book with the more established character with a new setting. That maybe some bigger eventful things can happen. That feels like a really good formula to develop things. But I don't want to rule out the idea that a one-shot book can never happen, because I think for maybe some of these avatars, maybe they only have a book's worth of interesting story, and I'd be perfectly fine with that. That I get it for maybe some of these more recognizable avatars, the ones immediately like before Aang, yeah, fleshed them out hugely. But say if they ever do like a Salai book, I'd be perfectly fine with that being the case. So let's see. If we go here, someone asked how many pages the book is. Can I find this easy enough? Let me see. Page count 336. Okay, so how does that line up with this? So here's Rise of Kyoshi. So this is 436 basically. So it's basically going to be the same length as the Shadow of Kyoshi, because the Shadow of Kyoshi is 100 pages shorter than Rise of Kyoshi. So this will basically be the same length as the second book. So That's interesting, because I definitely felt the lack of those 100 pages in the Shadow of Kyoshi. It was still good, but it definitely felt like it was missing a little bit. So I'm wondering how that will work. And I suppose because of that, yeah, we probably will need the second book. I think definitely that there's the need for the second book. Just to make everything work. Because if this is going to have like Yang Chen's backstory as well as the present day story, I think it would make sense to have something else happen as well. In that this one might only minorly allude to the spirit stuff. It would be kind of cool to have like the more spirit focused book happen next. So we'll see how that goes. But I do hope there's like some sort of an interview where like FCE himself, or just like say FCE and Mike get interviewed, and I'd like a statement about the plan for the books going forward. That's my thing, is just that I'd like to know, like, okay, Chronicles of the Avatar I think means that we're getting multiple books. It's not just book 3 and book 4. I definitely think it means we're going well beyond, and that we will eventually get Roku, but I would like them just to come out and give something that gives us a sense for, here's a sense for how the novels are going to go over the next couple of years. Because with how all over the place Avatar Studios seems to be, it would be nice to have a sort of solidified view on, this is the way we're going with the novels. So, maybe they'll say something about that. At the very least, I suppose, on release, I'm assuming something will have to be said. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. Depends on the length. You need to tell a story. More pages isn't always being good. Needs to fit what you're telling. So, yeah, definitely that. I say that about Shadow of Kyoshi because in that book specifically, there's sections about around the 3/4 way point through Shadow of Kyoshi. It definitely feels like the story just skips past certain points, in that like Rangi is missing for like a whole chunk of the book. The whole Heiron stuff drops out of the book for quite a bit. There's a few times where it feels like there probably should be a sequence addressing what just happened, and they don't do it. So that book felt like, yeah, it needed a little bit more, but Rise of Kyoshi felt like it was exactly what it needed. So there's that. So yeah, Avatar Studios announcement bonanza. We can only hope and dream that that's what actually happens. We're coming up to Comic-Con. Like, I don't really have much hope that they'll make any sort of announcements at Comic-Con. At least we'll know ahead of time, because the convention like schedule will go up and we'll find out if we do have an Avatar panel or not. I just feel that they're eventually, like, I think between now and probably February, I feel we need to at least get the announcement of the first project. Even if it's just the name of what it is, I think we need to be able to say Avatar Studios is making a movie. The movie is called this. I really don't like that it's been like a year and a half now, and we're still talking in vague details, and most of the only specific details we have are like insider information, kind of rumors that aren't like fully confirmed, but you can roughly trust that it's probably the case. So hopefully some of that stuff actually works well and we get that. Yeah, it's just, we've got 5 weeks to go until this book comes out, and hopefully in the meantime stuff goes well. Maybe we build up to a Comic-Con announcement, and they say more about what's happening with the novels. Next month, I think, is also the last opportunity in the year for them to announce comics to come out for the year as well. So who knows? But otherwise, it just feels like a year and a half in, I don't know if we've seen any change with Avatar Studios. It really doesn't feel like there's been that much of an impact. Things feel the same in many ways, but arguably worse because they seem to be doing this stop everything so we can do our stuff, and then it'll build up eventually. Because it feels like the longer they leave it, the more massive announcement that they actually need when it finally like happens. Like, are we going to be okay if it's just the one project being announced initially, whereas I'm expecting like movie, TV shows, spin-off, short form content, plan for the comics, plan for the novels, merchandise, soundtrack. Like, there shouldn't be anything holding back all of this stuff once you've planned it out. And like how much planning is needed is obviously what we don't really know. But I think if we get to February next year, so Investors Event 2023, so 2 years post Avatar Studios' initial announcement, and we don't get anything, I think the fandom is somewhat correct to sort of complain a little bit about why did you announce it so early when you weren't going to say anything for like 2+ years. That's not a pretty good situation. So, you know, the only thing that feels like it's properly changed is that it does feel like there's the full backing from, you know, Paramount, Viacom for Avatar. But the red tape that was always there is still absolutely there. I say the biggest problem for me, me and Greg discussed this on the podcast after we did the recording yesterday, was that we were briefly discussing the Dragon Prince and its season 4 announcement, and how like, oh, I really wish that you know, we could get an Avatar announcement, given that like they just got their announcement. And Greg just pointed out like, oh, they have their own website. Like, there's a website that is thedragonprince.com that had the news up the second it hit. Where's the home for Avatar news? And the answer there is like fan news accounts and sites. That's the best place to get news, because the official accounts basically only post like the planned kind of PR news deals that they have with outlets. So they'll only post about, say, oh, the new omnibus edition. They'll only post about the new omnibus edition that has a new cover when like Comic Book Resources reveals it, even though every fan has seen it for the last 2 weeks because it went up on the publishing website. That's that's just the situation that we're in. But yeah, just why don't we have an Avatar or an AvatarStudios.com, Avatarverse, Avatar Legends website? That's what we need to get to, for sure. So that definitely needs to happen. And yeah, that's the thing. Like the fans are doing most of the work here, and I suppose to some extent, like, fans are the reason this is all happening in the first place. That the shows came back to Netflix, they saw the popularity, and realized, okay, we've got to do more than this. They were already like making the live action show because of they knew there was a popularity, but it was that made it happen. So there's that. Yeah. What about the wiki? Yeah, like the wiki is a good resource. Like, obviously, like, it is still a fan run wiki. It's a well run wiki, but it's still a fan thing at its core. And it's let's just say it's been a long time since coronation was a thing, and we had proper official news avenues, for sure. What else have we got here? What's your opinion on how well you think the next Kickstarter will be on the RPG? I assume you mean the expansions, the Spirit World and the Republic City one. My guess is that they'll still do well. They won't do as well as the initial project because that was the big one. And then I think there'll be a slight drop on top of that because of kind of how messy the fulfillment has been so far. But I still think people will get it because it's new content and stuff like that. But I can maybe see more people leaning for the digital stuff over the physical stuff just because of the awkwardness of it. So, yeah. There's that. Yeah, lots of delays happening to things. What do you hope to see after Yangchen novel-wise? After Yangchen, I feel you have to do Roku. Especially now that we have all that extra information on Roku's era from the RPG book. I feel you have to tell a story using some of that information. I think it would be such a waste to not latch onto some of that stuff. It's tricky though because it feels like the most interesting thing coming out of that book is Sozen's sister rather than maybe Roku himself. But I think there's a way to make it work. Like, I think you can definitely do a double plot book where you just have kind of two separated plots. Where Roku being the Avatar doing one thing and maybe it overlaps eventually. Seiren, sorry, Seiren. Why am I saying Seiren? I've got Borto on my mind there. I'm completely messing up these things. Seiren, Zaysen, whatever Sozen's sister's name is. It's completely blanked on me. But anyway, that can happen in the book. But I think it has to be Roku. In terms of a one-shot book, I definitely think they could do a Karuk Umi book to finish off Karuk's story. That would only need one book. You wouldn't need to do two for that because it's just the final thing there. So there's that. I would like to see if they could get like the fandom behind, say, like a Salai book. Like a character who we only know about through the novels and isn't like inherently connected to the show or one of the TV shows. I would really, really like to see how that would do. Can you sell a book on the visual of a character that people have not like seen before, and it's just, this is a novel exclusive character? I think it's going to work. I think people will be excited to have like a complete mystery character going into a book. Because to some extent, like even Yang Chen feels like a little bit of a mystery where we know a lot about her, but don't really know what she's particularly like on like a day-to-day basis. Zito is definitely possible. I think it will depend on if they give more nuance to what else he was up to. Otherwise, that feels like it's like the accounting Avatar book, and I don't think we need to see all of that. Because I think there are some avatars that maybe you don't need to tell like a full-on story with them. You can kind of just get across, they had the typical path, they did this, everything went relatively okay. But this avatar, this is where things went crazy. I think there's definitely some options about stuff like that. So definitely that. I think with Chronicles of the Avatar, it feels like everything is going to have to be related to an avatar ultimately. Like I can't see us getting a book that just doesn't feature an avatar for quite a while. I think they'll eventually get to doing some sort of a series or a spin-off that does cover that. But I think the novels are here specifically to give us content on the these other characters who are kind of important, but you know they're not going to do an animated series about. But that said, I think a lot of people are thinking that Kyoshi might be primed for some sort of an animated content, even if it's just maybe the short form content and she gets like animation shorts. I think that could definitely happen with Kyoshi, just because of how popular she has gotten with those books. So there's that. Do you think they'll flat out say how many avatars there are? I don't. I think they've learned their lessons from a lot of early Avatar stuff, and they'll never say something like that this early. Maybe like a bunch of years down the line when we've learned about like a good few more avatars and the timeline between Wan and like Zito is filled in a little bit more, they'll commit to, okay, there's say like 105 avatars or something like that. Otherwise, I think they'd probably be a little bit silly to just commit to there are 90 avatars when we only know about like 10. Because they've made mistakes before on these things, and it's one of those pieces of information where that's not super important, I think, right now to know. I would just like to have a broader sense of like avatars in these various eras. Definitely. The Korra was called the 83rd Avatar in a random interview. Don't remember seeing that. But that'd be crazy if they'd actually plotted that stuff out. You can see with just like say how hesitant they are to mention like Earth King numbers, that they really don't want to mess with this a lot. Like say like this guy, like I suppose this is a quick yes or no. Will we get the number of this Mercurial Earth King? Because I'm assuming he'll be referenced in enough detail that he'll get talked about quite a bit. So will we get what number he actually is? This would be a very telling thing. I know in the Kyoshi books they did, I think, they mentioned that like, hey, like this number Earth King was assassinated or something like that. So they're not like completely adverse to doing it, but I think that was okay because they were referencing something that happened like a couple of generations ago. I'm not sure if they want to full on commit to like, once we sort of commit to telling the story of Yangchen, we're sort of placing it in relation to Kyoshi, and then we have like a line, we know the years and we can figure it out. So there's kind of little bits and pieces like that are there. And look, it's awkward. Like I'm assuming they have like a lot of information that like they'll never reveal to us until like much later on, but when they actually go to placing it in line, it just feels weird the way some of it works. But yeah, there's clear-cut mistakes with some of this stuff. Oh yeah, this question. I saw this one earlier on as well. So Yangchen's spirit animal, spirit guide, is it going to be a sky bison that she has, or is it going to be pick or pack? I don't know if it'll even get referenced, because I remember with the Shadow of Kyoshi, FCE made a big point about, hey, in the book, you're going to find out who Kyoshi's animal guide is. And then everyone came out of the book going like, did you? Is this it? That isn't really what I expected. Okay. Like, I still to this day, I'm like baffled that like he pointed that out as being like a thing, that like this is it and this is going to be satisfying to people. Very weird point there with the whole Kyoshi thing. My guess is that it probably will be pick or pack. just to make it a little bit different, so it's not just every air nomad avatar, their bison was their companion. It can switch back and forth, you know. The air avatar before Yangchen, maybe they had a bison that was their animal guide. But I'd like the book to maybe explore the whole animal guide thing a little bit more, and kind of cover some of the details about it. But we'll see what happens. Do you think the delayed Kyoshi paperback versions is so that they can reprint it to include the Chronicles of the Avatar brand? Probably. I'm not sure that explains the full extent of the delays, like into 2024, because it was 2024, like as of like a year or two ago. Like it was crazy when they pushed them back that far. But yeah, like when they do reprint them, I assume they'll have the thing that you can see the tagline on the bottom under FCE's name, Chronicles of the Avatar, on the Kyoshi books, because it's weird that there's the box set for the Kyoshi books out, and even they don't actually have the Chronicles of the Avatar branding, because it felt like, I guess that got printed like just before they confirmed the Chronicles of the Avatar stuff. Yeah, that's what's going to happen there, I think. So, you know, there's that sort of stuff. Let's see, we're just under 2 hours in. Like I said, I have some of these. I suppose I can run through these quite quickly. I was planning to make this like more of a big like second topic, but I think I covered most of the main theories in the video that I did a while back. So we'll just go over some of these ones here to sort of quickly round it off. So someone wanted me to talk about the whole purple dragon theory, which is the Druk is the ancient sun warrior artifact egg thing theory. Their point when they mentioned it to me was that they get frustrated when people always lean in the direction of viewing this as basically a confirmed theory. It is one of those ones where like it feels like all the pieces are there. This one works. This theory like feels like it 100% works. That it felt like it worked back in ATLA before we knew about Druk. Then when we saw Druk, of course, the whole purple thing wasn't true, but that wasn't the important part of the theory. It feels like if this is not the case, then why the line when Zuko's holding the egg where he says it feels like it's alive? Why is that egg protected by that mechanism and stuff like that? Again, there's some weird stuff. Like I'll again bring up the weirdness that one of the few pieces of new Avatar information from the RPG game was just random extra information surrounding how Zuko found Druk. That was just like, oh, he found him in his 20s. Okay. I still think it works in that it's just, I suppose, it creates the situation where Zuko wasn't there to see the egg hatch, but the egg still could have hatched from the Ancient Sun Warrior artifact, but only Zuko and he met later on. Again, it's one of those ones where like I feel like it's confirmed because you have to almost do more explanation to explain why it's not the case than why it is the case. So there's that. I covered this in the video, but people wanted me to discuss it again because it keeps coming up. This always comes up in the fandom. Now, I understand it comes up from people who maybe aren't as experienced in the fandom, and you know, it's their first time having the discussion, even though if you've been in the fandom for a certain length of time, you have had this discussion. The whole, if you are a lava bender, you have fire heritage that like your parents or somewhere along your family tree, there's a firebender in there, creating the idea that the technique is earthbending, but there's fire involved somewhere. The problem with this is obviously that one of the like hardcore rules that they have that they never really break is that only the Avatar can bend multiple elements. And the situation that one had to go through to get multiple elements is like impossible to repeat because of what's going on with the line turtles, the fact that harmonic convergence, which is part of it, only happens every 10,000 years, it's very difficult to replicate. So that's the only way you can have the multi-bending thing. And I don't think they ever want to create a situation where bending evolves to the point where just random people can be a waterbender and a firebender and so on. That's not how any of the examples of how kind of children that we see born when we know about their parents happen. It is an earthbending technique, and that is it. That's just the way it works. I sort of understand the logic that people go for when they try and add the fire onto it. Is that, well, lava is like hot, so heat, so it's earth bending plus fire bending because of heat. But again, this is the problem with this, is that just because there is sort of an effect that involves heat to some degree doesn't mean fire has to be involved. Because otherwise you have to suddenly say that, oh, firebending is involved in waterbending as well, because they switch water to ice and to, mist and steam. But very clearly, that is not the case. A waterbender bends the water to make it into ice, and the result of that is that physics, heat stuff happens. They haven't made that happen by bending the heat, they've made it happen by bending the water. The magic aspect of bending happens. Firebending does have like a heat bending aspect to it, which I suppose confuses people a little bit. So it's a case where, say, lava bending. Firebenders and earthbenders can both cool lava down. It's just they do it in different ways. As we see with Sozin, he directly does the heat redirection thing and sort of sucks the heat out of the hot earth, and that cools it down into normal earth. He's not earthbending by doing that. It's just a special form of firebending that he's using to make that happen. When an earthbender does it, they're obviously bending the earth itself and making that sort of heat effect happen as a sort of kind of result, but not the sort of aim overall necessarily. The heat is just sort of a byproduct in that case, because they don't want to sort of have bending break any more rules of like physics and stuff like that than it needs to. That's just the way it is with this. So it's just that kind of awkward like situation where I understand it, but we have the information to know it's not the case. There was another point I wanted to make about this. Let me try and get back to it. I sort of understand as well, because like, especially if you focus on ATLA, I definitely think that the creators and a lot of writers, I definitely feel, especially in early Avatar, they felt lava bending was a firebending technique, which is why in 108 Roku uses lava bending to take down the temple, and they talk about that as being like a signature technique that he does, forming the caverns and so on. In 201, when they're doing the run through the avatars using their elements, it's Yangchen doing the giant gust, Karuk with a giant wave, and so on. It's Kyoshi doing some massive earth bending, and it's Zito, the firebending avatar, making volcanoes erupt. Lava bending. They definitely felt it was a firebending technique at the time, and then later moved to realize it makes more sense for it to be an earthbending technique. And what saved them was that the avatar has all four elements, and that the avatar state is a way to make it so that, okay, that's how the avatars can more or less all use lava bending. That's how it works. Let's see this one here. The theory that the current avatar has the same face as the person the previous avatar loved the most. And the examples that were given to me were that Roku looks like Rangi and Aang looks like Ta Min. I think I had heard this one before, but I think I'd heard it before the Kyoshi books had come out. So I think other examples were used instead of the Rangi one. I feel this is one of those ones where this relies, I think, on just the fact that in general, I think characters kind of maybe tend to kind of look the same just because of the animation style. So a character from the same nation who maybe has the same skin color as another character, they do just happen to look the same. I don't really think this is intentional at all. In that, I don't think Roku looks like Rangi. Rangi looks like Roku. I'll give you that Aang sort of looks like Ta Min. I think there are some similarities there. But then you get to stuff like where it's like, does Korra look like Katara, or are you just saying that because it's like two Water Tribe women? And it's just kind of like, I don't necessarily interpret it as like Katara looks like Korra. I really don't think that. I think these are just coincidences overall. What are the other connections? This would mean that Kyoshi looks like Umi. I'll kind of give you that. Kyoshi with the makeup off kind of, I guess, resembles Umi a little bit, but you're having to stretch quite heavily to make that work, for sure. So it's nice, kind of fun one, but I'm not sure about that at all. Next, this was very simple. Just Yakone is related to Hama. I'm guessing the logic behind this one is just that, hey, the character who invented bloodbending must be related to the character who goes on to have the special bloodbending, powerful bloodbending line, psychic bloodbending, bending without the full moon. I get why people make this connection, but I don't think this means it has to be a relation as such. Just because, like, what Yakone, I suppose we don't know that if Yakone is like originally from either tribe, just that he goes from Republic City to the north. But I'm not sure if we ever got confirmation that he was originally from the north in the first place, or if he is actually someone who is more of a like Republic City waterbender. But I don't know. Because this would imply that, like, yeah, like Hama has children, which I don't think, I wouldn't guess she would have had children. Because if she hates the people of the Fire Nation so much, I doubt she would have kids with anyone there. I don't know. I think this one's a bit too hard to fully kind of make it happen. I honestly do believe that the whole Yakone family thing is that Yakone did just happen to be someone born as a very powerful bloodbender. I don't think it necessarily is a relation type thing. Especially because, like, Hama's a very powerful waterbender, but, like, say, Katara is just more powerful than she is. So I don't think there's that necessarily thing of the lineage kind of continuing on or anything like that. So I'm not sure. It's a tough one. But I don't really see this, but I don't think this has to be the case. Because especially because he has the skill to do bloodbending at any time, it feels like that's just something he was able to develop himself overall. Again, it maybe speaks to, I'd like to know more about Yakone's like actual like origin as such, but I don't think there's too much to say. Zahir was an air acolyte and knew Aang. This one, when it was sent to me, had a kind of in-depth explanation about it. But I left all of that out because this is what the theory is at its core. And obviously we don't know Zahir's full backstory, apart from the little, kind of tiny little bits of information presented in Book 3. Obviously this attempts to answer the questions of, like, one, why is Zahir, before he becomes an airbender, interested in air nomad culture? Well, if he was an air acolyte, that would help to explain things. If that was the case, it means he was there at a time when Aang was around, and he maybe could have met Aang, and there's the potential for that to be the case. Look, this is one it's like, okay, that's possible. It's fine. In that he sort of, I guess, knows what he needs to do, where he needs to go to get the Guru Lahima stuff during book 3, but I'm not sure if it is necessarily that, like, oh yeah, he was an air acolyte and that was it. This feels a lot like the whole, I think the one I covered in the video was like, Su Yin is Red Lotus. This feels like that sort of theory where, like, I get where it comes from. And it would have kind of been cool if they made the connection, because, like, you have the circus photo with Su Yin where it looks like there's a character that basically looks like a young Zahir there, but it was confirmed to not be the case. So there's a few things like that that are like, yeah, that one kind of would have worked. But again, this speaks to, again, Red Lotus need backstory. I hope we come around to it eventually. Minghua, Ghazan, Pali, Zahir, all 4 of them need development in that sense, and I'd like to get it eventually. So there's that. And then this one. This is very interesting. Lao Ge is Zhai Bao. So Zhai Bao, for anyone who maybe forgets this, is the guy who was part of the Order of White Lotus. He created the split between them that created the Red Lotus, and we go on from there. So Red Lotus original leader here, Lao Ge, is this guy. It's one of those ones where, like, if this was true, it'd be really cool. It'd be an amazing connection, and like, especially because, like, this is a character we meet in the novels, to reveal that he's actually this character who we all wish we knew about from before. It's possible, but we just don't know enough about Zhai Bao to be able to fully make the connection. Obviously, the interesting point here is just that Lao Ge lives on into Aang's era, into Korra's era, potentially. I'm not necessarily sure about this. Especially when, like, Zahir is one of the leaders of the Red Lotus after Unalaq. He uses Guru Lahima's philosophy. His rival was Shokan. And then the sort of potential kind of thing is that, like, oh, is Lao Ge Shokan? And maybe Lao Ge leans more to liking Shokan, so would he create an organization that has maybe the reverse dynamic? I'm not really sure. Again, we just don't know enough about Zhai Bao. But again, the interesting point here is that, like Iroh knew him. Iroh knows who this guy is, so that's kind of a fun one. Let's see. Zahir's strong knowledge of enemy culture, mastery of their techniques. Yeah, there's a few things with Zahir that definitely need more explanation, just with regards to, like, say, the other kind of cool thing, the what if scenario we discussed on one of the previous live streams of, like, what if Korra was trained by the Red Lotus? Where would she get her airbending stuff from? And I guess it would be Zahir, but non-bender Zahir having to train her. How would that work necessarily? Especially when, like, I disagree with the wording of, like, instantaneous mastery of their techniques, because in the fight against Tenzin, it's clear he doesn't use air nomad airbending techniques. He uses airbending with his own sort of unique style of martial arts. So, and then the idea is, like, an actual true master beats him. So it's a bit of a weird one. But Lao Ge Zhai Bao makes sense, but I'm not sure if that's actually what they're going for. It just highlights we need more in the Red Lotus. Everything about the Red Lotus. Who's Zhai Bao? Tell us the origin story. What exactly happened back then? And especially knowing that, like, theoretically this was a disagreement that happened with, like, Zhai Bao would have to air his grievances to the likes of Iroh, Bumi, Paku, Zhang, Piandao, and they would, like, disagree with him over what's happening. I'd like to see some of that stuff. and see like all the characters joining the Red Lotus and how they fully, came to be involved in this. It feels like an ideal story of like a kind of a villain focused story to see what happens. And then if you could somehow tie in that it is Zhai is Lao Ge, that would be kind of cool. I don't know if Lao Ge is the sort of character to be part of an organization and have strong beliefs about, the exact way the Avatar needs to do things and stuff like that. It doesn't fit the character, I think, as we know him now, given that like he's an assassin and all this sort of stuff. Unless he can really kind of change his personality to match a new role, a new identity. I'm not sure if that fully matches up as such. But yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, that's all I have. So I suppose as a kind of last sort of call here, any other theories you would like discussed here before we kind of wrap up the stream? Let's see. I've always theorized that there has to be a deep sea waterbending creature. It doesn't make sense that water would be the only one without a creature. So yeah, I suppose a waterbending animal. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. It's definitely weird. I've had this discussion a few times about the whole the moon being the waterbending kind of thing. It makes sense to a certain degree, but also then having the animals for the other ones is always a bit weird. I have a theory that the previous Avatar didn't actually lava bend, but rather used fire bending to heat the lava and generate explosions of lava, but didn't manipulate lava itself. I don't know. Some of the scenes seem like it's very clearly just, they're manipulating lava quite clearly. When Kyoshi does it, it seems to be very clearly lava bending. We reviewed 108 on the podcast, and when Roku does it to destroy the temple, it's clearly lava bending. The lava bending karate chop is pretty clean, and then just like he draws it straight up from well below. I don't think there's too much like doing other things to make movement of lava happen. I think he's clearly bending lava, especially because one of the things they commit to in the RPG is that Roku's special technique on his character sheet is actually a lava bending move. So of all the avatars, he's the one where they really double down on like, yeah, Roku has lava bending. So there we go. What do we have here? The Tylee I suppose Tylee has airbender ancestry. I think I discussed that in the previous video, and I like the intent of that theory, but I don't think it's particularly important. I much prefer the idea that harmonic convergence is kind of random to a certain degree. I saw one theory that Tylee trained Noatak and the equalist chi blocking, but I don't think it's true. Yeah, this is one of those ones where like I think they've done a good job in recent years at making it clear that Tylee is not the only way to learn chi blocking in the entire universe. That there are, like, even in the comics in ATLA time, there are people in the south, like Gilax, some of the people with him, they just have chi blocking. And the RPG especially like makes it clear that there are chi blockers in pretty much all the different nations in a variety of different eras. Chi blocking can come from different sources. I suppose in this era specifically, ATLA going into Korra, it does seem like kind of Tylee into the Kyoshi Warriors are the ones who have it. But yeah, just there's a variety of places you can get chi blocking from. So I think there's so many places they could have got it from, especially because the Noatak could have just went to the south to learn it from some of like the Gilax kind of people. Let's see. Yeah, and it's just that sort of general point of like, I like trying to tie everything together when we can, but we don't need to make connections like kind of in a way just for the sake of it, just for the sake of making connections and so on. That's the way like a lot of these kind of ones kind of feel, like the whole that one about how all the new harmonic convergence airbenders were people who did have airbending like ancestry somewhere. Like, I don't think that has to be the case. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it. So in terms of next stream, like I said in a community post relatively recently, my plan is to do at least one stream a month. So I'm not sure when I'm exactly planning to do the next stream, because I feel like I want to do it later in the month, because I want to do it like post Yangchen novel, or maybe do something like when I get the book. I don't know, or like, especially if we are getting news at like a Comic-Con panel, I would love to stream like us learning that information, just have that really exciting thing happen. So it's one of those ones where like I don't want to, I suppose, commit to this is the next live stream that I'm doing when there's actually the potential for us to get like the big news in the coming month. So it probably means that, yeah, the next live stream will probably be more like in like a month and a half, just because like we're obviously 5 weeks away from the book, and then the Comic-Con panel would be like in the days following that. It'd be the end of the week the Yangchen book comes out is when Comic-Con is. So we'll see how that goes. So either way, I'm probably going to be doing a live stream somewhere in or around that, like basically somewhere between like the 19th and like the 27th, I guess. That's when I'm going to be doing that. But yeah, otherwise, I think we went as in depth as we possibly could on the Yangchen book. I think everyone seems pretty excited about it, and you know, obviously I'll cover any new news we get in videos as it comes out. But yeah, right now it feels like the next news is definitely just going to be the release of this book. So other than that, thanks everyone to coming out to the stream, discussing everything with me in the chat. But that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye. So, what do I do now? Just wait for all the buys and thank yous to come in. Fun times, though. Fun times. But yep, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.